Hi, hello, and if you're new to the channel, welcome, and if you've been here before, welcome back now. I'm thinking about renaming this channel Reservoir Watch because I do seem to be doing a lot of reservoir watching. And this video is yet another reservoir watch. I'm back at the three reservoirs that feed the summit of the Oxford Canal. That is the Boddington Reservoir, the Wormleighton Reservoir, and the Clattercote Reservoir, to see how they're getting on. So the date is mid-December, and if you remember back in the summer, these reservoirs were very, very low indeed. So let's have a look and see what's happening. First one I'm visiting is the Boddington Reservoir. Now here's a quick reminder of what the water levels look like in the Boddington Reservoir when I visited back in July and October. As you can see, they are incredibly low. So how's the Boddington Reservoir doing now? Have the water levels come up? Absolutely, I'm stunned. I am absolutely stunned. Gobsmacked. I just can't believe how much water is in this reservoir. I know over the last few months we've had a lot of rain, and we've had sort of double the amount of rain I think in November than we usually get, but for it to come up this much is quite incredible. Still say it's got possibly 3 or 4 feet to go, but absolutely stunning. I'm just, yeah, almost lost for words on this. Absolutely incredible. I mean, when you compare it to what it was only a few months ago, amazing. I mean, this reservoir was built about 1805. It's been modernised a lot since then, particularly I believe in the 1950s and 1960s, and can hold 110 to 130 million gallons of water. And the amount it's come up since my last visit, 6 weeks ago, 7 weeks ago, it's absolutely staggering. Next I moved on to the main feeder system into the Boddington Reservoir, and this is the culvert under the road, and as you can see, back in July it was incredibly dry, not a drop of water in it, and it looked like there'd been no water in it for many months. And looking up the feeder channel in July, it was basically empty, a very small trickle of water running down it. When I revisited the feeder channel a month or so later, it was still incredibly dry. There was a little bit of water accumulating on the foreshore of the reservoir, but the main feeder channel still looked very dry indeed, hardly any water coming down it. So how did it look on this visit? Wow, I just can't get over this. This reservoir looked almost empty in the summer, and a few months later it looks like this. Absolutely amazing. In the front here, this was all sort of green grass with birds sort of standing on it looking slightly confused as to where the water's gone. Now we got all the water back. Quite incredible. I remember standing here looking at this culvert, looking at the system here, and it was empty, completely dry, with just the sort of faintest hint of a stream going through it. And if I look at the brickwork opposite, you can see 2 feet needs to come up, 1.5 feet. Not much at all to get it back up to its full level. When I was last at this feeder channel, there was the faintest trickle of water coming down the centre of it, and earlier in the summer it was almost completely dry. And now look at it, it looks like a small river, a canal. Looks like you could almost take a narrowboat up it. Quite amazing. I just can't get over how much water there is here in this system and back in the reservoir. Absolutely amazing. Incredible. So that was the Boddington Reservoir. The Boddington Reservoir is the largest and the youngest of the three reservoirs that feed the top of the Oxford Canal, the summit of the Oxford Canal. The Boddington Reservoir dates from 1805 and can hold 110 to 130 million gallons, whereas the other two reservoirs are significantly smaller. The Wormleighton and Clattercote Reservoirs, they were both built around the same time, about 1787, and the Wormleighton Reservoir only holds about 2.83 million to 3 million gallons of water, whereas the Clattercote can hold about 55 million, which is half of what the Boddington can hold. So let's see how the Wormleighton Reservoir is getting on. Back in July, the Wormleighton Reservoir looked more like a semi-dried up puddle than a reservoir. There were large expanses of mud, there was a lot of cracking of the mud, and there was very little water in the reservoir. It was quite surprising how little water there was around. When I revisited the reservoir in October, there had been some improvement thanks to recent rain, but the reservoir was still very low indeed. Okay, so here we are crossing the Oxford Canal, and here is the Wormleighton Reservoir. Wow, that reservoir is also up. Absolutely amazing. Incredible. The last time I stood here, this was empty pretty much. It was all mud flats here, all cracked, a few pools of water slowly collecting, but not a lot here at all. And now the reservoir has got a surprising amount of water in it. Interestingly, possibly not gone up as much as the Boddington. Looking at the sort of fishing stands around the place, they still seem to be quite high, but again, pleasantly surprised. This has definitely gone up. Excellent. Interestingly, the cracks that appeared in the bank here during the summer appear to have gone, which is good news. Signs of the cracks that were running along at the top of the bank here either. The Wormleighton Reservoir still got quite a way to go to be full. It's a long way short of the overflow. What's that, 6 to 8 feet I would guess, something like that. So it still needs a lot more water. Trouble is with this reservoir, it hasn't got many feeders. There's not a lot of water coming into it. It's cut off from all the water that would be available on the sort of canal side because of the removal of the steel trough. So it's only getting it from this side of the canal effectively, and there's not a lot around here. So this one's going to take a while to fill. Interesting, at first I thought this was water flowing from the reservoir into the canal, but it's actually water flowing from the canal and away through various streams and culverts. There's absolutely nothing coming out of the reservoir, and all this water is being taken from the canal because the canal is now full. Okay, so let's have a walk up to the feeder stream for the Wormleighton Reservoir, the only sort of source of water that's obvious that's coming into it, to see how that's getting on, and also go on to the spillway that is up at the Compton Tunnel, which replaced the old trough that took water from the left hand side of the canal here into the reservoir. That's just what you need, a log across the canal. I'll see if I can try and get it out. I did finally manage to get that large stick out from underneath the bridge. Took a bit of use of another stick, but I managed it in the end. Okay, so this is the far end of the Wormleighton Reservoir, and as I say, it looks pretty good. 6 to 8 feet to go, I guess, although those reeds tell a slightly different story, don't suggest it's quite that far, but looking at the marker and the positioning of the fishing platforms, I would say it's 6 to 8 feet to go. Now, this is the feeder stream into the top of the Wormleighton Reservoir, and quite remarkably there's water flowing down it. Not a huge amount, but there is some water flowing down it. Now, back in the summer, the spillway into the Oxford Canal from where the old iron trough crossed the Oxford Canal was completely dry, and even when I visited in October there was no water flowing down it. Well, it's another wow. Just look at all that water coming down the spillway there. That spillway is the one that replaced the iron trough. Now, that water that you can see there would have originally been directed down into the Wormleighton Reservoir and not straight into the canal here. But remarkable, amazing to see that flowing. Okay, so that's the Wormleighton Reservoir. Bit worrying to see how low it still is, potentially, I mean 6 to 8 feet, and that's going to take a long time to fill when you consider just how little water is flowing into it from that sort of top feeder stream. It's also interesting to sort of look at the spillway on the canal, that spillway which replaced the iron trough that used to take water into the Wormleighton. All that water flowing into the canal there would originally have been stored in the Wormleighton Reservoir for use during dry periods, and now effectively it's lost because it flows into the canal and then will flow out through various overflows and just go into the rivers or be generally lost from the system. So anyway, that's the Wormleighton Reservoir. My next stop is the Clattercote Reservoir, a bigger reservoir than the Wormleighton Reservoir, similar age, 1787. So let's see how the Clattercote Reservoir is getting on. Okay, so this is the Clattercote Reservoir, the last of the 3 reservoirs I'll be visiting that feed water into the summit of the Oxford Canal. Now, the Clattercote Reservoir was built in the same year as the Wormleighton Reservoir, that is 1787, and is a good sort of 15 times bigger in terms of volume than the Wormleighton, but it's only half the size of the Boddington, which comes in at 110 to 130 million gallons. So this one's, yeah, little baby, 55 million gallons. Now, even though it's the same age, 1787, as the Wormleighton Reservoir, it's actually significantly older than the Wormleighton Reservoir, in that there was originally a sort of priory and hospital around here run by, I think, St Augustine monks. I may be wrong on that though. And it was a leper hospital. And where the reservoir now sits was the fish ponds for the priory and for the hospital. So they had fish in there to provide food, meat during the winter. And when the canal was being built, what happened was they basically dammed it up further, made the fish ponds bigger, and made it into the Clattercote Reservoir we have today. So let's have a look and let's see how the Clattercote Reservoir is getting on. Now, a quick reminder of what the Clattercote Reservoir looked like in July. The water levels were very low indeed. And when I visited the reservoir in October, the levels had come up, but not very much. So this is the Clattercote Reservoir, and it's a bit disappointing. I was expecting much more water in there. If you look at the fishing platforms around the edge, you can still see they're way above the water, and it kind of suggests that it's got a good, 8, 10, 12 feet to go before it gets to capacity. I'm surprised it's so low. Now, this reservoir picks up water from the far end from streams that come in at that end, and they were flowing even late into the summer, and I would have thought by now they'd be putting quite a bit of water in here, but it doesn't appear to be the case. Anyway, that's the end of my tour of the 3 reservoirs that feed into the summit of the Oxford Canal. If you found this interesting or informative or fun, please don't forget to give it a big like, a big thumbs up. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing. On the screen now you'll see a QR code, and if you scan that QR code or click on the link in the description, it will take you through to a free newsletter about the grey wagtail. Thanks for watching for this long. Bye for now.